In Lab 1, we're going to do data display. And I will say, starting you off very easy as far as this lab goes, because what we're going to do is a table. And so with this table, you're going to display the components of a quality improvement project. Now, some of you have had quality improvement, which is HIT 254, and some of you haven't. And so we're not going to worry as much about you understand what these components are. I'm giving them to you on your directions, but this is just an easy way to be able to display data by, in this example, displaying data of the timeline or when things are due on a quality improvement project. Now, using Word 2007, what we're going to do per your instructions what we're going to do is to create a table. And the way that you do that, and I'm going to guide you through this process, is to insert a table. And instead of dragging your mouse down and determining how many columns and how many rows you want, I want you to go down to right below the grid and say Insert Table. And on your directions, you have the number of columns and the number of rows that your table should contain. And so you are going to have 9 rows and 2 columns. And so this is where you determine how big your table will be. I want you to designate 9 rows, 2 columns. Okay. Now you can move your table. And so let's move it down a little bit and come up. And the first thing you need to do is put your name on your actual report so that when I open it, I know whose it is. So you can type your name in, and then on your directions, I have a lot of formatting directions. So you need to read these and follow them. And the first thing that it tells you to do is to put your column heading, the title of your table in the first row of your table. And so instead of typing it above the table, I want you to come down and type in your title. And when you type in your title, you're going to type it in the first cell of the row. So again, you go by your instructions on what your table should be. And I'm just showing you an example. But what we want to do is make it go all the way across the table. And the way we do that is to highlight the 2 columns in that first row and right click, and we're given a choice to merge the cells together. And so we're going to merge, and that gives us one cell where our title is located. Also, when it's highlighted and we right click, or it's selected, I use that term, when you're selecting that, you can then center it and do any formatting you need to do. You were told, I think on the instructions, to make your font 26, so you can do that. And also, on your instructions, you were told which table style to use. And so when you're clicked in your table, you have Table Tools, and you can click on the Design tab and find different styles for your table. And as you pass your mouse over the different styles, it actually changes your table. You don't even have to click on them. It just lets you preview it. So I think on your instructions it said a medium grid. And so when you hold your mouse over the choices, notice it pops up what the name of that style is. This one happens to be the medium grid 1. Now if you go to the right, it's still the medium grid, but it says accent 1, which is blue, accent 2, which is kind of a burgundy and pink, and then the green. But I want you to do it with just the plain medium grid 1. then your instructions tell you to type your column headings in the next row. And so your column headings, I think I did say too that you need to bold your title and your column headings. You won't bold any of the data that you're inputting. And so in column 1 on the second row, you're going to type in your titles, and these are specified on your instructions, but I'm not going to type them in. I'm just going to pretend to type them in, and you'll see that they are showing up to the left. In other words, they're left justified, and your instructions say to align all the data and also that everything should be centered. And so the way to do that is to highlight, right click, and then we're going to see where it says cell alignment. There's a choice in the very middle that makes the information that's in the cell be not only in the middle from left to right, but from top to bottom. So in the very middle of the cell, we want it aligned like that. So we click on that. Also, while it's selected, we can right click and change our font, and we can bold it if the instructions say bold it. So this is where your title goes, but you'll also notice that on where your column titles or column headings go, I also said in that particular row or in those cells, I wanted the background to be white. So the way we do it is always you highlight or select, and you'll notice up here there is a drop-down menu for shading. Sometimes it's called background, sometimes it's called shading, and so we want the shading, and we'll find white, and notice it changes the color of those two cells or that row in the table. And we know that the rest, as far as your instructions go, the rest of the cells should be aligned, centered. They all have the same font, which I think on your instructions is 18. It doesn't say to bold them. So we can go on and format that by selecting all of the remaining cells, right-click, choose 18, and remember, as far as the cell alignment, we want that centered from top to bottom and from right to left. And so we can go on and format all of those because we know that we want those cells to look just alike. So then we'll go in and type in our data. Make sure that looked to be bold, and we don't want it bold. And so we just proceed to type in the first column, you are entering project components, and then the second column, you're going to enter the due dates. Now, on your instructions, you're given the components on page 2 of the CQI project. It's just different parts of the project and what day they're due. And so the very first thing, it says it's steps in the process. And that may not make total sense, but when you are doing a CQI project, you're actually looking at a process and how it works and see if you can find any ways to improve it. And so usually the first step in a CQI project, or the first component, is to determine the steps in a process as we're doing it now. For example, let's say filing loose material. How do we go about it right now? So we would define every step in the process. That is how we do things now, and then after we've done the project, then we can come up with steps of our proposed new way of doing it or better way of doing it. So you have steps in the process, you have your table of customer expectations, your surveys and cover letters, and I was specific in there to say that if there are two things due on the same date, then put them one under the other. Don't put, for example, customer satisfaction survey and cover letter. Let me show you here. So customer satisfaction survey. Well, it would help if I could type. And then enter and put in cover letter. So if you have two components, don't write them all out. It'll make the cell too large and it won't all fit in there. So do them one under the other. You'll see that on several dates that you'll have more than one thing due. And so again, you can actually, you know how I showed you to format all the cells together. After you've typed in your data, you could actually do it then. Highlight everything that's going to have the same font and the same alignment and everything. You can right-click then and do your cell alignment and your font and tell it whether you want it bold or not. So you can do it either before or after, but your title is going to be a different font, different size font and bolded. Your columns will be another font and then bolded or font size, and then the remainder or the data that you're inputting into your table will be another. And so I think the very last thing is actually formatting the borders. And so again, you can highlight your whole table, and notice when you click into the table that you automatically get the choices. And so as we go up here where we did for shading, if we'll go to borders and then go down to the bottom, now you can format all borders, such as right here, or if you go down to borders and shading, if you've highlighted or selected the everything, you can do it from borders and shading. So let's just right click and go up to our borders and shading, and I think I told you to do 3 points, and that's what this is. It's just the thickness of the border. So we can change that from a 1 to a 3, and also if we wanted to change the color, we could, but I didn't give you the instructions to change the color. It's just to change the actual size of the border. Press OK, and notice, well, I did change the color. So I'm going to go back in here, borders, and change this color back to black. Do OK. And so also on your instructions at the very bottom, I gave you an example. Now don't just go in there and copy the example. You need to take the data off the instructions, because the example, I may not have typed it in exactly like the instructions. It's just an example of when you get through, this is basically what your table should look like. So when you get through, you save your file, save as, and then save it as a Word document and name it as you are told in your instructions. Save it, and then you'll submit it via the assignment Dropbox.